ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this panel on the evolution of the workforce in a digitally globalized world. We've heard a very inspiring speech already here by one of our colleagues from Mr. Van Scheel, as an Industry 4.0 expert. Very enlightening, and thank you for those insights. I think we come back to many of those aspects throughout our conversation and our discussion. We also welcome Sergei Chermin from Moscow, Minister and Head of External Economic and International Relations. We further welcome Jawad Abazi, Head of the MENA region at GSMA. We will have insights from Daniele Sciliro, Professor of Economics at the University of Messina in Italy. And most welcome as well, Mario Cimoli, Deputy Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission of Latin America. It's a very diverse and interesting panel. I'm very much looking forward to sharing some insights to all of you on the very important question how foreign investment will be affected by automation, by artificial intelligence, and in particular, how it affects job creation and how it also affects the necessity for skilled laborers. And we've seen not only skills, but even possibly a change of mindset. So that's let's just dive right into the topic. We would like to start with the actual impacts of automation on job creation. I think it's one of the most pressing topics, and especially around, do we really face a significant change or possibly loss of jobs here in the short to medium term or long term even? Something I would like to assess first before then going into more the reaction. How do we deal with this from a policy level? How do we cope with the challenge of a new skill requirement or new mindset requirements? And then finally, leading to the point of foreign direct investment, and will that, the nature of foreign direct investment change, and how can we, from a government perspective, also change the requirements and the locational setting to actually enhance and improve the investment and the quality that it actually produces. So the first point of the impact, maybe Daniela, we should I pass on that question first to you as taking a perspective from the academia. What is, in your view, the impact on job creation in the future through automation? There's very different scenarios, from job losses of 1.8 billion jobs at risk in the developing economy, which the World Bank in some report recently stated. What's your perspective? Do you share that risk that we're facing?
Well, the risk exists, but we must first recognize that technology and technological progress has also helped in the long run humanity, people, and because I always make the example of health care. Without technology, a lot of people, even in the underdeveloped world, would have died and instead they improved their quality of life, their life expectancy. And so technology, we must look at it in a positive way. The problem is, effectively, the new technology, as Eric showed previously in his speech, is going very fast now, and is transforming the economy very quickly. And of course, there are negative effects. Daron Acemoglu and Restrepo wrote a paper saying that there is a technology has a displacement effect, so a negative effect on job market, on labor market. but at the same time, there is, you create new jobs, so there is an restatement effect. People find new works, produce new goods, and so on. And also you have a productivity effect, which means with the new technology, you can improve your efficiency process, you can improve your process of production, you can improve the service, and so the efficiency. So at the end, the problem is how the sum of these effects will be. I mean, maybe in the short run can be negative, but in the long run can be positive, but under a proviso. You need, especially from a government and international institution, some policies, active policies in the labor market and not only in the labor market, but especially in education, to improve the quality of life of people which are negatively affected by technology.
Do you already see today evidence of direct impact on jobs created or not created in your country? So maybe we start here with Mr. Cimoli, that what about Latin America? Do you see some immediate effects already that automation is creating?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I think it's clearly that we have a potential impact, but we have an impact probably in the manufacturing sector. For example, take the industry of maquiladora industry that is in Central America or Mexico, where people is working in plants who are producing manufacturing products. Clearly, most of the process has to be changed, has to be reduced, the participation of human beings in production processes. Many of the processes are going to be controlled by robots in some cases, artificial intelligence in the others. And in both cases, you have the potentiality to reduce jobs. That's in region where you have an enormous supply of jobs, it's a problem. This is the first one. The second one, these impacts could be very high and have a negative impact on more weakened part of society. For example, women, where you have an enormous unemployment people in the Central America that are women in manufacturing sector. That is clearly we have a potential negative impact. But however, on the other side, we have the opportunity to absorb investment if we put together the combination of low wages and automatization. We have there the opportunity. But clearly, my friend said before, we need a combination of active policy. We think some industrial and technological policy with the capability to attract new foreign direct investment. This is complex. And we need an issue of a scale. Scale is very important because the investment doesn't arrive in a country that are very small. We need an area where digital impact has to be very large and absorbing it.
Yeah. Well, the question of scale is certainly decisive for the policies that we need to take. Moving to a different part of the world, Mr. Sheramin, you're from the city of Moscow and Russia as a country. What's your perspective on automation, and what are the current developments in your country and your region that affect job creation or changes in jobs?
First of all, I would like to congratulate the previous speaker. It was very interesting, and my idea was to start my story from how Moscow is important, mentioning GDP and some other positions. Since that time, I will never mention GDP, for sure, because it's not really objective statistics sometimes, and some virtual understanding of what economy is doing. Nevertheless, it's an important factor, and coming back to GDP, Moscow is a locomotive of Russian Federation, providing nearly 20% of all the wealth of the country. And to my mind, this process of digitalization, that is one of the key issues for the competitiveness of the megapolises, which play more and more important role nowadays in the existing world. You know that nowadays nearly 55 or 60% of all the population of the world live in the cities, and within 20-25 years the number will be 75 or even 80%, and that will be the most important production site for the humanity. And if you take Moscow, for example, we have some paradoxes. We, for the last 8 years, since the new mayor took his position, we invested a lot into the digitalization of all the municipal spheres. It's infrastructure, transport, it's healthcare, it's education. We dramatically reduced bureaucracy. We make the processes tolerant and open to all the companies. We try to reduce corruption cases, and this digitalization process, for example, we convert a lot of old industrial sites that were in the depressive situation into technoparks and technopolises, and nowadays you can find most advanced industries there, like nanotechnology, pharma, like robotics, microelectronics, software, and just transforming the economy, you could easily find yourself in the situation that you will throw away a lot of people, but the unemployment rate should be very high. If you look at Moscow, we do not have unemployment at all. We just import workforce from the other regions, and especially from the other countries. At least 1.5 million people are working in the city. And that shows that as soon as you have targeted investment, as soon as you have stable growth, you invest into infrastructure, you create favorable conditions for the business to grow, you support with incentives startups and new technologies, and you invest into the human capital, that dramatically changes the whole spectrum of the labor force. And this is nowadays, I mean, the human capital is one of the main targets for the investment of the government of the city. That's why in 2011 we adopted the special program for making revolution in Moscow education. We invested within 7 years more than $30 billion just in education, in changing the whole environment, in trying to combine children gardens with schools, create a connection between schools and universities to make the process of learning integrated process. And that created new environment in schools, and according to last PISA, for example, assessment of the quality of education in the biggest megapolises, Moscow was qualified number 5 in the world. It never happened before. And if you look at the graduates from the secondary school, you'll find that before, for example, it was fashionable that all of them are going to be diplomats, lawyers, bankers, economists, and or take some other positions. Nowadays, 30% of the graduates from the school in the city are going to be professional skilled. Not engineers, but they would like to work in the modern enterprises, understanding what is the machineries, what is the digital, let's say, learning and artificial intellect and all these other things. And the other 30% or even 40% would like to be engineers. They would like to be in aerospace, in nanotechnology, in robotics. So assuming all this, I think that these modern processes of digitalization of the world, this 4.0 revolution, if you are targeted and if you wisely distribute the wealth of the budget or the wealth of the city, and the city is the same company, you have just different stakeholders. If you have exact strategic targets, you will be successful and you won't be plunged into these social problems of unemployment or structural unemployment.
Well, excellent. So there are already two main points made. So one was from a quantitative point of view, the net effect in the long run is not going to be negative, but actually positive through gained productivity, which is encouraging. But on the other hand, from a qualitative, we see a change in the need for the skills level, and there will be a drastical change in jobs that are executed right now and that can be replaced by automation. So maybe we can pass it on to Mr. Scheel to our broader perspective.
Maybe I should be a little bit, throw a little bit wood on the fire here and be a little bit controversial. I'm totally impressed by what Moscow have done, how far you have gone. If we fragment it and look very honest on the labor market and the future of work, we always want to do the Kombucha Club like everybody will be a winner. Our models in the world, our economic models are built like this: growth. Everybody has to grow, and growth is built on productivity. That means there will be winners and there will be losers. Our labor market is built up in the following manner. We have skilled laborers. The skilled laborers, there will be a fight about skilled laborers. The best people in Moscow, if they're really good in AI, they will be hunted around the world. And then we have the specialized labor. The very specialized labor is when you're really good to a machine, you are very good to very manufacturing areas that are skilled. They will be pursued as well. And then we have the big labor market, which is the cheap labor market. And when you really look at it, every country around Europe, around the world, they walk on the labor market. UK would not exist, the hotel market would not exist without the Polish people. I mean, like, Germany would not build all these houses without having the Polish labor market working in. I mean, like, you can fragment in. Spain is the fruit market for Europe. You can fragment the labor market in. So this is an ecosystem that works around. So if you put one of these pieces out, it's a very fragmented element that is in there. So the labor market is a very competitive market. So when you think about one thing, Estonia came out of Russia 15 years ago. They had a very structured Russia thinking. They were very entrepreneurial. Their mindset won over them. But because they think different, you have Skype coming out of it, you have many organizations coming out of it, and Estonia is like a small country. You can put them in a small city in Germany. It's a very, very small city. And they have created more innovation than most European countries have done in 15 years. This is like where you say, wow, what happened there? And they were doing it on specialized labor market. Yeah. So, and when you look on Poland have a 5% growth. They are 5%. Yeah, oh, sorry, 5.6. Yes, very good. But this is like very, very impressive. When you look on the European countries, they are leading the pack.
Mm. Well, Mr. Cimoli, you wanted to comment on that straight away.
I don't know if really you have the same parameters to evaluate how the impact of the new labor market or new technology. Also, have you said before, GDP is not a good indicator, productivity. You have a paradox of productivity. Everything, we have digitalization, but we don't have any measure about productivity is growing, no country at all, but everything is changing. is completely the recent interpretation of what's happened really that we have to change about that. Foreign direct investment is not the same because we're thinking about foreign direct investment because you created greenfield. Today, greenfield, what is about greenfield today? Because you can have a one 3D printer and everything can be substituted. I don't know, I think we have to rethink many labor market, productivity, GDP, labor, and the concept itself of what is foreign direct investment. We have to rethink a little bit about that. It's a micro new situation.
Amen.
Well, maybe before we get into the discussion, which is great already, Mr. Jabazi, let's, you actually...
I represent the GSMA. We're the trade association of the mobile industry. We represent 750 mobile operator groups that basically run the mobile broadband platform, if you will, globally. Now, I'll share some information. So, ICT has compressed time and space, and of the 7 billion people now in the world, 5 billion are connected to the mobile in the platform. So, it is the most pervasive connectivity platform. Another 1 billion will be added to the connection. So, by 2025, we'll have 6 billion people connected to the mobile telephony network. And mobile broadband is also the vast majority of people who use the internet use it through mobile broadband. The mobile broadband infrastructure is really what the road network has done to trade. I'll give you examples. The mobile money, we're talking about how technology can adversely affect employment and increase unemployment. But actually, we have some really positive examples of how connectivity and mobile broadband is allowing marginalized segments of the global population to be digitally included and financially included. Mobile money, for example, by end of 2018, is close to 900 million people with mobile money accounts. Almost 2/3 of them are in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia. These are people that were 10 years ago did not have a mobile bank account and 10 years ago did not have any connectivity of any form. It is more likely to have a mobile phone in some parts of the world than to have electricity in your house or even a toilet in your house. So with almost 900 million people with mobile money, these are 900 million men and women who were not connected to the global economy, but are now connected to the global economy. Globalization definitely puts pressure on employment in the rich world because it gives them competition from hitherto countries that were not in the global competition. Another example, just recently Uber acquired Careem in the Middle East for $3.1 billion. And Careem is another business model that created tens of thousands of jobs, also gave excellent service to many users, and diverted economic activity from established monopolies, if you will, to new entrants. Without the mobile broadband network, this would not have happened. So these are positive examples of what can happen, and it's not a zero-sum game. When you have 7 billion people, with many of whom do not have electricity yet, you have actually a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for creating wealth rather than having it in a zero-sum game where if one man or one person gets an extra amount, that's a loss for the other person. Look at the whole vast array of industries that weren't before. Mobile gaming, the entertainment industry, the YouTubers. Now, any smart person anywhere in the world with a good mobile broadband connection can have a YouTube channel. And if you notice how our kids are consuming media, they are completely beyond the linear TV. We sit in front of the TV and we wait for the TV channel to tell us what to watch. If you watch our kids, they're actually following what they want to watch on demand. And the people generating that content are making millions of dollars. Millions. You have a kid who plays with kids that was making, I think, $30 million a year. So a lot of that wealth is new wealth created because of the mobile broadband technology. One last point, I represent the mobile industry. Don't take us for granted and don't take the mobile broadband networks for granted. We didn't wake up one day to find the internet or the mobile internet. It is actually trillions of dollars of investment, years of investment and years of sales and marketing and business development. And the industry needs respectable return on equity for it to continue to invest in mobile broadband. So a lot of the regulation has to change.
I mean, very interesting points you're making, especially with regards to new jobs being created, which are completely in a different industry, which are requiring a complete different skill set and approach to doing business, certainly. And so, in that sense, sectors and activities are affected in very different ways. Some new and some are maybe fading, or at least tasks or part of the job is being taken over through automated systems.
If you look at, I like to give always this example of, in the United States and North America, I think 100 years ago, 80% of the population worked in agriculture to be able to feed themselves. Now, less than 1% of the American population works in agriculture, and they're able to feed most of the world, not just themselves. So this is the shifting of the component of work.
Where I would like to focus on in this discussion now, and I open the floor to comments from everyone, is what are we doing with those jobs that are replaced? Those people that have current jobs, then that automation changes the production process or the service process, where their skills currently are not necessary possibly anymore. Moving into the policies and the changes that need to be pursued by governments. What is your view? And Mr. Schiel, you wanted to say something, and then maybe you start out with this round.
Yes, thank you. I want to say, commenting what the others said about, I think you need two things to succeed in this new industrial revolution 4.0. First, and the example that the Moscow, also other example, UAE is another example. You need first a clear strategy, a clear vision of what you want, where you want to go, what you want to do, which sector you want to improve, and so on, which policy for education. I mean, the strategy, the vision is very important for government, I think, first of all. The second point is to have an allocation strategy about workforce. And this is another important problem, and which is related to the strategy, of course. And the allocation problem involves also education, investment, and also choices about which, as Eric said, if you are an underdeveloped country in Africa, for instance, you cannot think to compete directly in this globalized world with Germany at the start, because you cannot succeed. So you have to find your way. I mean, there is no a unique strategy. Each country, each region, or in the case of Moscow, a town, decided to have its own strategy, and they succeed. Of course, sometimes it's easier to succeed if you have a limited country. UAE is not so big. Moscow is big, but not huge. Instead, if you are Nigeria, that's a bit more complicated because you have a lot of people with other problems. But in any case, you must have first the strategy, and second, you must sort out this sort of allocation problem. Why? Because, as I I was talking with a friend, Mario Cimoli. The economy, the sector of economy evolved in a different way because technological progress, the evolution of technology affect each sector and each company differently. And also because the evolution of demand in each sector, in each segment of the sector is different, changes at a different pace. Then you must take into account this uneven growth, let's say. And that's why you need a policy and a strategy, and then a policy, and a strategy also for the allocation to compound and to somehow rebalance your problem. Okay.
Mr. Van Scheel, yeah, you want to...
You know, I can say this was perfecto, Professor. Really well said what countries need to do. And I wanted to highlight a little bit what the Moscow city is doing, because he mentioned that really well. When you really look on strategies that you do, you normally segment it for countries or for governments like he did. He did it in a very simple manner. He didn't use the terms, but I just fragmented in categorization. 70% of everything that he focused on is on the cheap labor cost. The working force, the people who work. That 70% in a country, in a city, is always non-core. For this, you need to supply them with a strategy that focuses on, I need to make sure they have infrastructure, digitalization, communications. They need to be connected, and I need to deliver a service for them and a basic education. Not everybody in their life will achieve a dream. That means that they have a family to support. They are manufacturing. They are the ladies. They are going out to the field based on. Then you have 15% in Moscow who are industry specific. 15% of the labor supports the industry that is within Moscow, where they compete with other countries, with other cities, where they compete head on head. This is where they have specialized skills, good skills. Then they normally have 5%, which is very, very specialized elements where they are investing. The city is investing proactively in to build the skills for the future. That might be in quantum computing or in nanotechnology, where they want to be the leaders in years ahead. But the 5% are an investment. This is like money down the toilet. But the government knows that, and that's a difficult thing. I wanted to add with the professor one thing, and then I'm actually finished, because that's a difficult thing. Actually, governments or companies, you see it in a normal following way. You have 4 main pillars. You have the business world, you have the citizens, you have the banking, the financial institutions, and you have the government. The government sets the direction. The citizens, consumer service, they deliver the workforce. The business, they deliver the work, but the business requires from the financial sector investment within it. The kickstart of all of this is how Sergev mentioned it quite well. He needs to set the paradigm for the education. He needs to set the paradigm for the infrastructure, communications, FDI, all the basics, not rocket science. It's not like he has to reinvent the book. He just has to do the basic things to create basic education, equality, safety, that they can work and they can be a labor. That's basically the basic principles that they work with.
Well, Mr. Shermin, maybe you mentioned before the investment program that you put into education. Can you just elaborate on that a bit more, on and maybe others can add a best practice on investments from the government side into programs to upskill, reskill people?
I 100% agree with my neighbor, because 10 years ago we inherited, I cannot say a terrible city, but it was a very, very problematic city, and we faced a lot of challenges. The traffic jams, we were on the first place in the world. You could hardly come from airport to the center of the city within 3 hours, and that was terrific. So connectivity was not also very good. Infrastructure was in a bad shape. not because the previous government didn't invest it, but they maybe were focused on the other things. There were no organized parking space. Everybody parked his car everywhere he wanted, because according to the previous philosophy of the communism, everything belongs to people. So the city belongs to those who drive the car.
This is the case in most cities
This
in
is,
the MENA region.
yeah, and we had long queues to children gardens, to schools. You could hardly find specialists in the medical, in the healthcare that you needed. That's why we decided not to follow, as you mentioned fairly, the example, for example, of Singapore or Germany or France or United States, because we are not United States, we are not Singapore. Situation is totally different. At that time, by the way, Moscow strongly dependent from the income from oil and gas. Approximately 35% of all the budget were formed by resources. Nowadays, we have less than 5% that are formed by the oil and gas company, and we don't care about how much the brand is nowadays. We made revolutionary steps to organize intellectual transport management system that facilitates the situation with traffic jams, and we enlarged mobility of the population 25% within 10 years. How it happened? We didn't follow the example of, for example, the same Singapore or London or Paris. We took the best knowledges from those cities. We make a combination of the technologies. We made our own software. And nowadays, it's one of the most, let's say, modern intellectual transport management system in the world. When I show it to burgomeisters from Germany, for example, they told me, or the governor of Tokyo, he told me, look, you have much more skills in this system. It's much more intellectual than even in Tokyo. We could never dream about it, but it was our own product. When we, for example, tried to create favorable conditions for business and a friendly environment and for citizens, because before, most of the citizens were afraid to work in parks after 9 o'clock in the evening. Nowadays, after the midnight, you'll find families who are working. All parks are full. People are jogging, they enjoy the nature, because Moscow introduced one of the most, let's say, effective systems of video surveillance and data processing. We have more than 150,000 cameras integrated in one system nowadays, huge data centers that analyze what is going on in the city. And the success of the World Cups that we did organize last year, when we, within nearly a month, didn't have any one serious criminal accident, having more than 1 million people coming from abroad and from not, let's say, easy countries, from Peru, from Brazil, from Mexico City and others. And when they were plunged into the friendly environment, when they understand that the city itself is not hostile to them, and they are supervised, by the way. We didn't have police, we didn't have horses with police or armed vehicles on the streets. You could never find it. It was mild power, but they understand that the city is supervising and nobody violated the rules. For example, when we invested into the subway and the road infrastructure, all the people told us, you are crazy, what are you doing? You are spending you should give some social subsidies. It's much better than you invest into the construction of subway. But within 15 years, we double the length of Moscow subway. We are number 3 in the world. We have only Beijing and Shanghai in front of us, who is constructing the hard infrastructure with such a speed. Last year, we opened 17 new subway stations within 1 year. When I mentioned it to Americans, to senators who came to Moscow, they were so shocked. They told me it's communistic propaganda. You cannot do it at all. It's not possible because in New York we launch one station within several years, even having much bigger budget. But when you invest $1 into infrastructure, you attract $3 or $4 immediately of investments from the private companies. That's why nowadays Moscow is booming. And it's booming not because we are stealing money from federal budget. We do not have any 1 penny of transfers from federal budget. We do not have any 1 penny of debt. Moscow, if you compare it with New York, for example, that have 130 billion, I think, debt, 2 times bigger than the budget, we should be considered AAA. But they are AAA, we are BBB minus. That's not fair. And if you look at the quality of working force, of the human capital, just recently, Foreign Direct Investment magazine awarded Moscow the best and the leading position, speaking about the capital, about the friendly environment, about the, let's say, perspectives for foreign direct investments and friendliness. If you take our, for example, IT solutions last year, United Nations awarded us #1 place in the world for IT solutions in municipality. And that was a shock. When I show it to foreign delegations, they do not believe that we provide 240 services, government services, through internet, or you can easily get any document from that.
Well,
That's
I mean,
impressive.
That's very impressive developments, and I think part of it is also the labor that's available and the people that are involved. And so in that sense, Mr. Cimoli, you wanted to maybe also say a few words on the best practices on the policy side, and maybe with regards to your specific region that you're active in Latin America. Is there policies that known to you that are a best practice in your view on the skills level?
I don't know. I think there is some common factor that is very easy to say. When you say, I need to attract foreign direct investment, I need skill for the future. What does it mean? I need education, more education for the future. What does it mean? If you take, for example, what you say at the beginning, sectors, I need education for the sectors, manufacturing sector, which is today manufacturing sector. If you take the automobile sector, you think the manufacturing in the automobile sector today is the same that 30 years ago, 10 years ago, it's completely different. It's digital connected, another thing to do is completely different, the structure. When you're thinking about the skills, and you have to put public policy, if you design today a public policy for the future skill, people that is going to be in the labor market is going to be in the next 10 years, 15 years. When you arrive there, everything is changed. That is the point. How do you design public policy for people that have to be in the labor market to attract foreign investment in the next 10 years, where you didn't know what is going to be happen there? That's a crucial point. I think there is a practical combination. For example, many years ago, you say, I need people preparing software, telecommunications, something like that. It could be, but today probably I need a combination of engineer, philosopher, designer, and other completely different skills. The problem when you design public policy is the time that you design the public policy in 10, 15 years, and many times you understand what really the profession that you need. I think you have to maintain the spectrum, technical, design, philosopher, education in broad sense, basic education, school, and so on. You have to have a large policy. Many times when you have a strong target, when you arrive to have that target, everything has changed. I think it is very difficult to design policy. When you ask into the state a public policy to design a package of policy, it's not easy. Time is completely different. You're speaking about telecommunication. Telecommunication is changed completely different in another 10 years. Manufacturing is another thing. Think about. Now, the difficulty of that is you have to take policies that are not too risky, okay? Because are public resources. And you have to have, and that is important, and a strong alliance and a strong partnership with the private sector. I think that is a crucial thing, not only to design public policy, but to have a partnership with the private sector to understand and change policies continuously.
Yeah. So, Mr. Abazi, as a representative of the telecommunication industry, what do you think of policies it requires to enable automation and artificial intelligence?
I'll answer something that I read occasionally in The Economist magazine. And they maintain that I worked as the Economist Intelligence as an analyst 15 or 16 years ago. And the basic tenets for employment are critical thinking, basic literacy, and basic numeracy. So if you have a workforce that's good with numbers, that can critically think, and that can read well, then for the basic jobs, anywhere, anytime, they're equipped. They can do the basic jobs needed in any major economy. And frankly, more than 80% of the jobs just require these basic skills. So that's where governments have to focus. And then, of course, people have to be innovative and study more and do their PhDs and to do their specialty sets and so on. So the real talent will come from that base, but the education policy should focus on excellent literacy, excellent numeracy, and critical thinking, not spoon-fed. This is a problem we have in the Arab world, spoon-feeding information. So I read it in a book. You see that with many students in the Arab world. I read it in a book, as if because it's in a book, it's dogma. You read it in a book. No, you read it in a book and you can say, you know what, I don't agree. I have a different opinion than this book. We don't have that much in our educational system.
Mr. Van Scheel, you've worked with companies on as well to help them transform and automate systems and change. What, in your opinion, are the drivers for them to conduct that change? Whereas, from my personal experience, I've been in touch with companies that are actually saying, we have a shortage of labor, we have actually real issues finding people. Automation is actually a solution to our problem, so that part is causing the other. What's your view on the corporate perspective and a driver of technological change and automation?
It's some sort of the same view that you have. Most organizations, they do it for cost cuttings. So either then they decide very fast to do a cost cuttings. This is like cutting down to your bone. And it will cost you more money to resurrect the skills that you've just got loose of. So it's actually investing long-term in skills to do value-based cost cuttings. That means that you cost off the labor, and you want to renew your cycle. Most companies that have a high level of productivity level also have a high level where you say, my age is around 45 of the employees, so they want to decrease that. They want to get new skills in. They also don't want to keep too many of the gray hairs. Why? They are too expensive, too many benefits for them, and so on. So they focus on productivity, effectiveness, cost cuttings, and so on. But I wanted to highlight a point we haven't highlighted in this panel, because I think the skills categorization and classification is one element. The challenge that we all face, that we have here, is that the generation that is coming is a younger generation and a fewer generation. That means our benefits that we are receiving, the work that they're taking over from us, there will be fewer of them. That means all of us that sit here have to work longer. All of us, the chain that we have broken between the government and us of the value benefits forth and back is also broken. That means the labor market will undergo a riddle that is really, really big, because See, Jochen, who's going to pay your pension? When there's fewer to pay your pension, and we're not talking about healthcare, we only talk about pension, your system is broken. Now, I can already tell you, I have 2 children, 26 and 24. They're not paying their money into a pension. Why not? They don't believe that they will receive it back. What's the problem? They're paying in for my pension. That's the problem. And that's not against, it's just to show that the overarching model is broken. It doesn't matter if you go to Moscow, if you go to UAE, wherever you go. The skills labor market is a fine balance of the skills you need for the future, but also the skills you need to maintain the ecosystem that works in our economy. So, can I work 5 years longer? Yes. Was that my intention to work 5, 10 years longer? No. When you look at Australia, Australia is doing the radical thing. They said everybody before 69, they get pension. Everybody after 69, I'm sorry, the party is over for you. You have to work longer, right? The same labor element will go for all the European countries. That's the problem.
Can I be a contrarian here? I don't know, maybe the future is, maybe we will all work less, but we will still be better off. I'll give you examples of smart cities adoptions. For example, using the mobile network now, cities, and this is actually available in Dubai, I believe already, cities can now, for trash collection, something as mundane as trash collection, it used to be that the trash collecting van or truck will go every morning in the same route and collect the trash bins. With the smart city adoption, it actually, the path for it is generated on a day-by-day basis based on how full the bins are, based on the sensors. So it's actually, it takes less of a route, less congestion, and less pollution. In Sao Paulo now, they're using big data so as to, rather than get the measures of this is too polluted, let's have some measures to reduce traffic there, it's actually doing predictive analytics where they say, if you don't do it now, you will have a pollution problem in this neighborhood, so you start acting now before the pollution hits. In India, they're using also artificial intelligence with big data to predict where the next tuberculosis outbreak will happen, so that the medical people are ready before it even happens, and actually they can prevent it. So we might be looking at a future where, just as 100 years ago people didn't have the weekend, we might be looking at a future where we're working two days a week, our grandchildren, and they're better off than us. And they have the entertainment and they have the lovely lifestyle. Who knows?
The route optimization in waste collection is actually quite a neat example. I like it very much because it documents a lot. I mean, it goes as far as there's no one needed to pick up the waste, actually. But it needs someone to program the software to optimize the route. So I think that's where a picture, like where it's heading. The issue that we are facing as well is that companies now, where do you find the software developer that can set up the route optimization software? And at least coming from a developed country, there is extreme difficulties of finding these people locally. So there's companies going on trips to Eastern Europe all the way to Bulgaria to identify and spot software developers that can solve their problems. So ultimately, we're getting into a situation where, and now this leads to the final question, foreign direct investment, how does it affect foreign investment? You're getting to a situation where the company moves to where the skills are, and not the skills and the workers go to where the factory is, which is the old world. So maybe let me open a last round here with regards to foreign direct investment and that change of the skill set and the change of the workforce, and how does it actually affect the flow of foreign direct investments? You can please go ahead.
I don't know. I think there is many times we have the answer that clearly the foreign direct investment move where you have a better skill. But today, I think it's a transition process, not clearly. Yeah. Because we have, I quoted the word of reducing taxes, okay? Today, foreign direct investment is moving more to the United States because for reason that we know really from Europe to the United States is that we have a large flow of foreign direct investment or returning capital, if you want, that moving more for tax reforms. And it's very difficult to understand this tax reform is going to have a more important roles that skills. Of course, skills in the micro is important, but to build up skills today require times, and time is real times, not the time we have economies in our mind. It's very difficult. I think today we have an uncertainty. We have processes where countries are competing by taxes very strongly. There is an important strategy that has to do with the digital connection. Take the case of 5G. Today we have a trade wars, if you want, because people who want to control or not control what is 5G, that is going to be an important basis for all of the processes we're thinking about. Today skill is important, but probably it's not more important than another period of the lives. Today we can move or use processes in our countries, and not in the country where the investment is going to be to do. I think the answer is, okay, skills continues to be important, but we have an uncertainty world where there is other barriers we have to have in our minds that has an important pressure. Taxes, technology, control of technology, standards, protocols. It's a process that is different. Here, of course, combination of the skill is becoming important. But probably many times skill is becoming important from the origin country than not the receptor country. We don't know. This is uncertainty. We make a mistake if we continue to read foreign direct investment in the same way. Everything is changing. We have to rethink about that. This is my point.
Yeah. I want first to say two things about Mario Scimoli. He said correctly that to make public policy is difficult, to make choices in public policy is difficult. But about education, I want to add, yes, what to teach. I think the first thing is to change the mentality of the culture, the basic culture of people. Now, what is changing our world? Climate change, so the environment is very important, globalization and technology. These three factors are changing. So education must, young people must understand this big change that are related to the environment, the connectivity, the globalization that includes connectivity and also technology, all the evolution of technology change. About attracting FDI, I want to tell about Milano. Of course, you know, Milano is the business town, business city in Italy. I studied in Milano when I was young. I stayed in Milano after my degree for a while. And now I go to Milano quite often, and in the last 15 years, Milano has changed completely. Now attract a lot of talents, and you know, till the 80s, 90s, we were studying a lot in Italy, economists, industrial districts, no? These manufacturing clusters, no? And now we realize that in a place like Milano, there is a sort of innovation-driven district, or if you like, a knowledge district based on design, industry like fashion and so on. In fact, a lot of people, even from the south of Italy, like to go there or take the degree there and remain to work there. A lot of multinationals now invest, especially in service sector, in Milano. Milano really, just to mention one thing, last year, the building real estate investment in Milano was 50% of the national investment in building and real estate. Just one city covered 50% of the was something like 40 billion euro. Because it's increased, you know, they are building up new plants, new buildings, and so on. So Milano is an example of how to attract talents, because they set up new infrastructure, they improve the infrastructure, they have good university, they network the university, they have also a lot of specialized skills in, as I said, in design. So
Which is perfect. Just a quick final statement. I was already told we need to wrap up here, so maybe just really like a 10-second to 15-second final statement on FDI effects, and so we can wrap up this panel.
For me, right? Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay, 15 seconds only. Okay.
Yes.
Five
At least I have to challenge you a bit
Okay.
here.
The mobile industry, now we've reached a milestone where there are more 4G connections than 3G connections globally. And now there will be 5G commercial deployments in Korea, China, GCC, and North America, and some in Europe. For FDI, that will require a lot of foreign direct investment in the 5G networks. And the 5G networks need harmonized spectrum and very cheap spectrum compared to the 4G and 3G spectrum. So European governments and other governments need not look at spectrum pricing like they did before, because it's a lot more dense networks. And for 5G to succeed, spectrum needs to be widely available at very, very affordable prices.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just a few facts about the FDIs. We have stable growth of FDIs, even we are in sanctions, but our main partners still European Union, United States, Great Britain, China, some other countries, and accumulated volume of the FDIs in Moscow only economy is more than $250 billion, and it's growing stably. Best industries that are attractive for foreign companies, these are for sure financial sector, then industry, retail, real estate, new technologies. And one fact, one of the biggest engineering centers that was opened by Boeing just a year ago was in Moscow.
Excellent.
The biggest Schneider Electric engineering center was opened in Moscow. The Renault Nissan invested into the production of cars in Moscow, and you could hardly find any megapolis where you produce cars. And now they are exporting their cars from Moscow to European Union. And the biggest engineering center is also there. So that shows that we
Tremendous
still have some
development.
perspectives.
Excellent. Okay. Mr. Van Scheel, you opened this session, you are closing
Very
it.
very short. I mean, I'm very impressed by, you are giants who sit here. You are gurus in your field, very impressive. You have done a really good job actually paneling it. To make it very short on FDI, you can segment it into 3 segmentations. 80% of FDI is focused on everything internal that a country does. This is maintaining the normal labor force, nothing else. 15% within FDI is where you have the big horses in your countries that are supplying the revenue, the growth, the work. When you look at any country, there's always 20% that create 80% of the revenue in the country and labor force. These are the 15% you need to focus on FDI. Then you have the 5%, which are the flagships. They are the unique elements. This is where you need to focus on. So the 80% is where you need to focus on performing internally within your element in FDI. 15% is where you need to be competitive. You compete head-on-head with the industry players that you bring out. And the 5% is where you really need to outthink. This is a difficult thing to do. When you look at most of what you've seen here, you're all doing the same stuff. Moscow is without a doubt doing something very, very unique. They have raised the bar from here to here in no time. This is no short of a little miracle what they have done.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for this tremendous discussion and excellent insights. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.